Okay, so the latest on the National Guard movements around the country is that 200 or more National Guard are officially in Illinois getting ready to go to Chicago. Is this about gang shootings? Not anymore. According to the president, this isn't about crime. It's about political compliance. The president posted today, quote, Chicago mayor should be in jail for failing to protect ICE officers. Governor Pritzker, too. Now, are local authorities supposed to protect ICE? No. Is ICE unable to function in Chicago? That is a real question. Now, if you want the answer to be no, they can't, you point to Saturday. Immigration agents got surrounded by protesters, resulting in one protester getting shot. Is that able to function or is it not able to function? Why wasn't ICE afforded a local perimeter of protection? That is the question that must be litigated and has political and legal aspects to it. What are local authorities legally supposed to do where ICE is involved? This has to be litigated. It's a gray area. Why? Chicago is a sanctuary city, okay? Are you allowed to have sanctuary cities? Or is that a constitutional thing? Yes, but if the sanctuary city law violates or contradicts federal law, you can't be here if you're illegal, you can be here if you're illegal, then that violates the Constitution. It violates the Supremacy Clause, which means that if federal and state law conflict, federal law wins. But then why is it a gray area? Because that's not what sanctuary city laws often say all over this country. It is more about, hey, you can't tell us to do your job, ICE. You have to do it. And we are not going to help you do your job. Now, is that just states, Democratic states, saying no to the federal government? No. That is what one of the most conservative justices of all time, Antonin Scalia, decided, that under the 10th Amendment, the federal government cannot deputize or enlist local cops to do their job and insist on it. The feds have to come in and do it themselves. But do the locals have a duty, legal duty, to keep ICE safe? That's going to be litigated. Now, the political question is, does the Democrat look strong to other Democrats by saying, not only am I not going to help ICE, but I'm going to make it very painful for them here, even if that means communities attack them? That's tricky. One law that sanctuary cities like Chicago have that I do not think will pass muster is prohibiting states and cities from preventing their cops from exchanging immigration information with federal officials. Do you know where this guy lives? Do you have a jacket on this guy? You know, has he been prosecuted before? And that is what Chicago does. So, political and legal. Let's go over both with much better minds on this, okay? Not on the political side, but look, I get what Pritzker's doing. Democrats want muscular resistance to what the president is doing, full stop. When it comes to ICE, that's an easy thing to want because ICE is arguably overreaching, hyper-prosecuting, and getting way more than bad hombres in these roundups. And it's hurting communities, and you could argue the fabric of this country. So let's talk about the law. Former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi, okay? Trump attorney Jesse Binnall. Jesse, let me start with you, and thank you both for being here. Jesse, what is the argument that ICE can't operate, therefore, to effectively enforce federal law, the president must call in the National Guard?
Chris, thanks for having me. And here's the point on this, is that the National Guard is there to be federalized when there is this federal issue that's in place. And when you have a state like Illinois right now that is allowing people to obstruct the work of federal prosecutors so clearly the way that they are in Illinois, that is an appropriate time for calling in the National Guard. It's been done in this country time and time again. There is a federal interest at play here, and it is absolutely appropriate that the National Guard be called in to protect ICE's ability to get the job done.
Two questions. One, it has not been done time and time again. This is something that happens very rarely unless a governor is asking for it. But the second question is the fact question. Gene, can the government make the case that they can't do the job when they have a record number of arrests happening in Chicago and everywhere else? How is that not doing the job?
Well, let me just give you some history here, Chris, and my colleague Jesse. My wife went to Ole Miss, and in 1962, they federalized the National Guard to enforce
For
the
desegregation under the Insurrection Act.
Well, yes, and that was to allow James Meredith to enter Ole Miss and integrate the schools. But I just want to say this. I was a federal prosecutor in EDVA, which has taken a lot of hits lately, but I did a lot of immigration cases, illegal reentry. And here's what you can't do. I don't care whether it's Governor Pritzker or a Republican governor. You cannot ignore court orders. So when ICE or any federal agency sends a court order to a detention center or some facility that's controlled by the local or state government, and the order says turn over a body, you cannot ignore a court order. What these sanctuary cities are doing is, if we get an administrative request, we're not going to honor that. I have one solution. It's called Congress. If they really want to add meat to the bones, they will tell local and government officials in Illinois and other states that you got to comply with a court order, but also an administrative request to turn over a body. So that's the legal basis that I'm focusing on.
Yeah, but, you know, Gene, you lost me there. I know you're right, but now we're out of the realm of law and back into politics, and Congress has abandoned its duty. These men and women who do the job on the border have begged for rule changes more than anything else for decades. Congress won't do it because this works better for them than solving it. It allows one to say Democrats have no head, and it allows the other to say Republicans have no heart. Jesse, when I look at these pictures, I see local and state cops creating perimeters around ICE. What do you think? Well, I got to tell you, I think your best argument is don't make a fact argument because the courts are going to defer to the president, give him the right to be wrong, even if he's wrong about the facts and whether or not ICE can do its job. The courts will defer to him. It's his call to make whether it's right or wrong. Is that good policy, though? If he's wrong and they are doing the job and you don't need the National Guard and God forbid the National Guard uses force against somebody?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think there is an important point there, Chris, and that is, you know, most cops in places like Illinois and throughout America are good cops trying to do their job and protect against this lawlessness. And yes, we always want to let good cops be cops. But there comes a point where the politicians get in the way, and politicians getting in the way is, I think, what we're seeing here right now. And that is the point where I think the president is absolutely right, and he has that constitutional duty that he is the commander in chief. And in order to protect the American people and execute his duties as president of the United States, he has the obligation to step in and do that, because the cops too much right now and in a lot of places are just being hung out to dry by the political leadership, and that's what has to stop.
Hey, Gene, isn't Pritzker's best play not to chest bump with Trump? I mean, look, I guess that's what passes for toughness these days, and the Democrats are so desperate for somebody to talk back at Trump. But isn't his most muscular opinion to go in and win in court and say federal law is being enforced? They are doing their job. I am protecting them the way I'm supposed to. And he doesn't need the National Guard and win. Isn't that the best way?
Absolutely. And I want to go, there's a judge in Oregon, Karen Immergut. And the reason I mentioned her is she issued one or two opinions recently, and she's no flaming left-wing lunatic. She worked for Ken Starr and interviewed Monica Lewinsky. She was an AUSA, assistant U.S. attorney, a Trump U.S. attorney, now a Trump judge. She held that President Trump she respectfully disagreed that there was an emergency that justified the use of the National Guard. To get to your point, Chris, I think Pritzker should follow the law because it's on his side. I don't think President Trump has the basis to declare an emergency, in this case, in Chicago or LA or any other state that they're going into.
Yeah. You know, I'm with you. I get it, Gene. I do have a concern looking at the pattern of the decisions and some of the jurisprudence here, doing some homework on it. The courts do have a tendency to allow a president the right to be wrong about a factual basis for an emergency. I don't think that they are used to this kind of president and how he can abuse facts, but I think there is a built-in jurisprudential idea of deference to him. I just wish they were only arresting bad hombres, and then you wouldn't have this problem in the first place. If you weren't grabbing people that were fundamental to communities, people wouldn't be so pissed off. Anyway, let me jump. Gene, thank you. Jesse, always a pleasure. Appreciate you making the case. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.